It's the most famous Christmas story since the one about that kid who was born in a barn. The year is 1843. The man is Charles Dickens. The pocketbook is empty. The story is Nestor, the long-eared Christmas donkey. Sorry, I meant the story, of course, is A Christmas Carol. By now, pretty much everyone on the planet is familiar with at least one version of Charles Dickens' classic novella about the story of a penny-pinching miser who is visited on Christmas Eve by spirits of his own past, present, and future. The book is a beautiful rumination on the Christmas season and a powerful story of redemption, which all the best Christmas stories are. It's a Wonderful Life, The Nightmare Before Christmas, Die Hard, and it does so with a classic Christmas ghost story. It's only in the past century or so that ghost stories became more predominantly associated with Halloween. In Dickens' time, in an era where there was no radio or television, everybody gathering around and telling stories to each other was a holiday tradition, and a lot of those stories fell on the creepy side. So for those of you who think that line in the song about scary ghost stories is a bit out of place, I'm here to tell you it's a time-honored tradition. At the end of the year, I guess it's a natural time to stop and take stock of your life, an accounting of your failures. Think about that one time your belt buckle broke and you had to try to get it fixed without anybody in your sixth period class noticing. Yeah. And using ghosts to hold a person accountable for their life is a pretty natural extension of that idea. Dickens wasn't being weird. Everybody told spooky stories at Christmas. This isn't even the first one Dickens wrote. It's the best, but it wasn't the first. But the story behind A Christmas Carol is almost as interesting as the book itself. You see, Dickens was having a bit of a struggle with his publishers who weren't happy with the way his most recent book had performed. He wound up writing A Christmas Carol in a mad rush between October and the beginning of December, and then wound up putting up a lot of the money to have it published himself. Sorry, give me a second, I'm feeling seen. The book was published on December 19th, 1843, and by Christmas Eve it had completely sold out. More printings were immediately ordered, and by Christmas of 1844, the book had gone to press 13 times. So good for Dickens, he had a hit. His troubles were over, right? Oh, my sweet summer child. Although the book was a hit, the printing costs were considerably higher than Dickens had expected, and he wound up taking home only £300 on that first printing, which is the equivalent of about $60,000 American today. It sounds like a lot, but he had been counting on making closer to £1,000, or about $200,000 American dollars in 2024. As if that wasn't enough, the book was so popular that other unscrupulous publishers started printing pirated copies, wanting a piece of a pie that none of them had anything to do with baking. Dickens wound up taking them to court, and although he won, the legal fees almost completely wiped him out. It's amazing how being a writer hasn't changed in 180 years. But the experience fired Dickens up to the point where he launched a crusade that wound up leading to much greater protections for copyrighted work internationally. Basically, if you're a writer, a musician, or any type of creative person who relies on copyrights, you owe a debt to Mr. Charles Dickens. If only we could get him back to take down the AI bros. But the legacy of A Christmas Carol doesn't end there. You see, at the time it was published, Christmas was in sort of a nebulous state in England. It was more of a small festival. It wasn't celebrated by as many people. It had been sort of on the decline ever since Oliver Cromwell launched his vendetta against it back in the 1600s. But the story painted such a beautiful picture of the holiday that more people started celebrating again. They started singing carols, giving gifts, borrowing traditions from the Germans like putting up Christmas trees and sending Christmas cards. Of course, the next time the Germans tried to influence British culture, they started to do it in a more hands-on way. But it's not an exaggeration to say that without Dickens and A Christmas Carol, our modern celebration of Christmas would be much, much different, if not completely extinct. So, Mr. Dickens, as someone who loves Christmas and someone who owns his share of copyrights, I thank you, sir.